Voters headed to the polls in 5 state primaries today to pick candidates that they want to go on to the general midterm election in November. You've got primary elections taking place in Kansas, Missouri, Michigan, Washington, and Virginia. Now, in Washington, one of the most hotly contested congressional elections that could determine the control of Congress is that of the state's 3rd district. Incumbent Democratic U.S. Representative Marie Gluskamp Perez is seeking a 3rd term in that battleground congressional district. She faces off against Republican Washington Senator John Braun, Democrat Brent Henrich, and 6 other candidates. Now, 10 candidates in eastern Washington are challenging Representative Michael Baumgartner in Washington's easternmost congressional district. Baumgartner, who's seeking his 2nd term in Washington's 5th district, is facing a challenge from 6 Democratic candidates and 4 independent candidates. The freshman member of Congress introduced the Power of Water Families Act of 2026, and that's legislation that could require AI data centers to pay the full cost of power and water infrastructure needed to service them. In Virginia, Republicans there are set to choose who will take on Democrat U.S. Senator Mark Warner in the fall. Retired Army Major General Burt Mizawa, certified public accountant and former federal financial executive Kim Farrington, and David Williams, a combat veteran, former CIA case officer, and former State Department diplomat who continues to serve as lieutenant colonel in the Marine Corps Reserve. They're all seeking that Republican nomination. Meanwhile, Democrats are eyeing Virginia as a battleground to flip the U.S. House. In Missouri today, voters are going to take up a ballot measure that could give some Illinois residents in the Metro East area a reason to move across the Mississippi if the Missouri measure passes. The measure, which will be present on the ballots today, it proposes an amendment to the Missouri Constitution that could phase out the income tax entirely. According to polling by YouGov and St. Louis University back in February, the ballot measure could just narrowly pass if the electorate votes along the lines of the findings. 52% of voters in the state would prefer the Missouri state government rely on sales taxes over individual income taxes. And then in Michigan, the Democratic Senate primary between Haley Stevens and Abdul al-Sayed, it's evolved into one of the nation's most significant ideological showdowns. And that party primary is raising fundamental questions about the future of the Democratic Party and what role the government plays in solving some of the affordability crises facing American families. Now, joining us to discuss the primary in Michigan is Michigan State Director for Americans for Prosperity, Tim Golding. Tim, thanks for taking time. As we just laid out a little bit of the different things happening across the country today in the primaries, a lot of eyes are going to be on Michigan, and in particular, that Democratic primary between Stephen and al-Sayed. What really should Michigan voters be looking out for here?
Yeah, well, in the Democratic primary, you have the choice between a socialist, a Marxist, and a progressive who's painting herself as a moderate. And the choice couldn't be clear between those two and Mike Rogers. I'm the senior advisor for Americans for Prosperity Action, and we've endorsed Mike Rogers in the race. And obviously, he's the better choice for limited government principles and freedoms and opportunities for Michigan families. The other two candidates, not so much. If you look at al-Sayed's DSA attachments and his love affair with that organization, he's a socialist. He wants to fundamentally change this country. And you don't fundamentally change things that you love. He wants to have, capitalism, but he wants it to be regulated. He wants Medicare for all. He wants, but ironically, his wife, I believe, is a doctor, and she doesn't take any forms of insurance. She's cash only. So I wonder how that'll work with his new plans. But both he and Haley Stevens want more government control in your life and less freedoms and opportunities for Michigan and American families. And we just can't stand for that. That they are, they're coming at it from different angles and how they want to get to where they're going, but they both end up in the same spot. And that's not what Americans want.
It sounds like there's some balancing here between the ideas of having practical reforms versus having ideological battles within this primary. Is this kind of like a microcosm of what we may see play out in other states across the country with their Democratic Party going between maybe a moderate progressive versus a Democratic socialist?
Yeah, this is, this used to only happen in the blue states, and now it's happening in Michigan. And it will be a bellwether, as it were, and tell what's going to happen in future state elections in the next few days or whatever. And it truly, the Democratic Party is searching for its soul. It's lost its way. And you have some really progressive people in the Haley Stevens camp, but then you have the Democratic Socialists, the Marxists, in the Mondamis, the El Sayeds, the Bernie Sanders, AOC. They want to fundamentally change this country. They want to get rid of the Supreme Court. They want to change the presidency. They want to get rid of prisons. They want to abolish ICE and law enforcement. Not just change it, but they want to get rid of it. And that's just not any of the founding principles that this country was founded on. And again, well, like I said earlier, they want to change how this country operates. And the way this country has operated, three branches of government and so forth, has made us be the strongest, most powerful, most prosperous nation for the last 250 years. And I hate to think what happens if they ever did get control. But I do believe Michigan voters, and we talk to them every single day, are not going to be swayed by the snake oil that Abdul al-Sayed and his camp are selling. They're going to see through that. They're going to see that when those policies, if they ever get enacted, would just steal freedom and opportunity from Michigan families and Michigan businesses. And Mike Rogers' plan for energy abundance from all sources, educational reforms, healthcare reforms, are the right path forward for Michigan families to give them, again, more freedom, more opportunity, and more money in their pockets. It's our money. It's not the government's.
Well, Tim, obviously with this primary election, Democrats are going to the polls, and you've got Republicans in other races that are going to be going to the polls for their party. I imagine the conversation about economic freedom versus expanding government, that's going to be a much more thorough conversation in the weeks and the months ahead up into the November election. But just how important is that conversation to AFP and to taxpayers in Michigan and beyond?
It's very important to us. I mean, the cost of living, whether that's energy or groceries, is a problem. It's a thing that's happening. People experience it every day. Our candidates that we endorse in our organization are fundamentally in line with less government intrusion in our lives, less government regulations and red tape. Take energy, for example. Mike Rogers wants to change the way we permit energy production, wants to clear a path so we can have more energy infrastructure built so that we can have energy abundance, again, from all sources. And when people hear Mike's plans, which completely align with our policies in our organization, they do see a clear path towards less government regulations and less cost. You could point to, in Michigan, for example, in November of 23, the Democrat-controlled State House, State Senate, and Governor's Mansion all passed a bill that mandated green energy and carbon neutral things. And in the time since then, we've now have the highest energy costs in the Midwest with the least amount of reliability, and people are paying for this. We point out those democratic solutions, those socialistic solutions, those mandates from the government only increase costs and limit freedom and opportunity for Michigan families. They see the Republicans having a better path forward. And we talk to people every day. And when they see and hear what Mike Rogers wants to bring forth as a U.S. Senator, they're coming on board with his way of thinking. And we talk primarily, again, to swing voters and show them that the conservative Mike Rogers, the principled congressman who will hopefully be the senator soon, has a better path for them in their lives and let them keep more of their hard-earned dollars than the Democrats and the socialists that only want to increase the size and scope of government. We point that out every day.
Yeah, the president recently was in Michigan holding a rally talking about tax policy and tariffs and trying to defend those. But you've got to also weigh this with the voters heading to the polls. Do you think that Trump is a liability here, and some of the inflationary pressures, the war in the Middle East, is that going to be a weight around the Republicans' necks heading into November?
Those things certainly don't help. And I don't think Trump is necessarily a weight around somebody's neck, although he's not on the ballot, obviously, but his policies and his plans are. If we can get through this Iran conflict and bring down the cost of energy, I think that will help. Certainly, it's not going to help. It's not going to help if it keeps going the way it's going. But again, we always go back to what our policies are, what our candidates that we've endorsed, what their policies and their plans are, and showing Michigan families that those are a better path forward, that the Democrats and the socialists never do anything except for increase the size and scope of government. And our policies don't do that. They give more freedom and opportunity back to Michigan families and Michigan businesses. So we have to talk around that. We have to acknowledge that it is a problem. People aren't, they go to the store, they got to buy bacon and eggs. We want them to be able to buy both, not just one or the other. But if you show the trend of how things have been going, we are in a much better place economically and inflationary wise than we were under the Biden administration. So it's a long-term gain, and there are some short-term pains, but we try to talk people through that and show them that our policies and our plans are the better path forward.
We'll be watching closely what the outcome is in Michigan, especially whether the Democrats there are going to choose to stay with a moderate progressive or go even further left to a Democratic Socialist candidate. And we'll be watching other states as well. Greatly appreciate your time. Tim Golding, Michigan State Director for Americans for Prosperity.